The woman in the white coat walked past Marcus Reyes the way people walk past supply carts and electrical panels and everything else in a hospital that exists to keep the building running but is never the reason anyone is there. She was on her phone, speaking to someone about imaging results and a surgical consult and the specific time constraints of a procedure scheduled for the end of the week. And Marcus was standing near the door of room 412 with a stack of folded linens and an expression that had long since learned not to ask for anything from anyone moving that fast. She stepped around him without looking up. Her badge said, Dr. Victoria Hale, Chief of Pediatric Cardiac Surgery. He read it the way a man reads a name he already knows, carefully, without letting his face do anything with the information. She continued down the hall at the pace of someone who had somewhere more important to be. He watched her go. Then he pushed open the door of 412 with his shoulder and set the linens on the chair by the window. His daughter was asleep in the bed. The monitors above her ran their slow green lines. Her hands were folded on top of the sheet the way she always slept, palms facing up, as if waiting to catch something that was taking its time arriving. She was 8 years old, and her name was Lily, and she had her mother's mouth and her father's particular stillness, the kind of quiet that in adults reads as reserve and in children reads as something older, a patience that makes people who meet her want to ask who she learned it from. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Marcus sat in the chair beside her and did not touch anything because she was sleeping and she needed the sleep. He looked at the monitors instead. He had spent 11 years of his life reading monitors exactly like these, in rooms that smelled exactly like this one, under the same flat fluorescent light that turned everything a half shade paler than it actually was. He knew what each line meant. He knew what a deviation in the second waveform indicated and what the appropriate response would be. He knew it the way a man who has done a thing with his hands for long enough stops knowing it consciously and starts knowing it the way he knows how to stand upright. He was wearing maintenance gray. His hospital ID listed him as M. Reyes, Facilities and Patient Transport. That was what it said, and that was what he was, and he had been that for 3 years without complaint. The work needed doing. The building needed to function. And at 3 in the afternoon, every afternoon, he was in this corridor. He had arranged his shift schedule himself on his first day. The charge nurse processing his paperwork had asked if he had a preference, and he had said yes. The pediatric wing, 7 to 3, and she had entered it without follow-up. Nobody on staff had ever asked why. He had been there 3 years, and he had a reputation for reliable work and a quality of silence that the other orderlies described, when pressed, as not unfriendly, just private. The actual reason was simpler than private. The pediatric wing was where Lily came for her monthly appointments, and then her bi-weekly appointments, and then her extended stays after the diagnosis. He had arranged to be there because that was where she was, and because 3 years ago he had learned that there are certain choices a life hands you that cannot be balanced against anything else. You make them, and then you live by them, and that is the full extent of the decision. Elena died in March, 4 years ago. A highway accident on a Tuesday morning when the roads were wet and the other driver ran a red at 50 miles an hour, and there was nothing after that to do but understand that some things do not negotiate. Lily was 4. She did not remember her mother in any specific way, but she kept a photograph on the nightstand. The one from a weekend the 3 of them had spent at a rented cabin in Wisconsin, Elena laughing at something Marcus had said, her head tilted back, her hand raised against the sun. Lily looked at that photograph every morning when she woke up and sometimes talked to it very softly when she thought no one could hear. Marcus heard. He never said anything about it. He had taken the facilities position at St. Calloway Medical Center 6 months after Elena died. His colleagues from his previous life had called, written, come by the apartment. They offered things, consulting arrangements, a research position, a teaching role at Northwestern. He thanked all of them. He declined all of them. What he needed was a job where the hours were fixed and the work was physical, and he could be home for dinner and take Lily to school and be the one constant in her life that required no explanation. The other things, the published studies, the grant he had been 2 months from finalizing when Elena died, the named protocol bearing his work, Those belonged to a version of his life he was no longer living. The diagnosis came 4 months ago. A cardiologist named Dr. Sung, who had been monitoring Lily since a murmur flagged at age 6, called Marcus into his office and spoke plainly, which Marcus appreciated. Pulmonary valve stenosis combined with a ventricular septal defect. The defect's configuration was unusual, more complex than standard presentation. Medication was managing her symptoms. Surgery was the only curative option, and Dr. Sung wanted to refer her to the best team at St. Calloway, which meant Dr. Victoria Hale's department. Marcus listened without moving. He asked 2 questions. The first was about the surgical approach. Dr. Sung described the procedure, a combined repair requiring a specific sequencing of interventions that had a name in the field. It was called the Reyes protocol. Dr. Sung explained it carefully, as a physician explains a complex procedure to a worried parent. Marcus nodded and asked his second question, which was about Lily's recovery timeline. He drove home after, made dinner, helped Lily with a project about the water cycle. When she was asleep, he sat at the kitchen table in the dark for a long time with a cup of coffee going cold in front of him. The Reyes protocol. He had written the paper that named it. He had designed the technique across 14 months of research and 4 years of surgical refinement. He had performed it, in various forms, 41 times. 39 of those patients were still alive. Now his daughter needed it. He went back to work the next morning. He pushed the cart. He changed the linens. He delivered the trays. He was in the pediatric wing every afternoon at the time he had arranged to be there, and Lily saved her questions for him. All the ones she had collected through the school day and the afternoon about animals and weather and the specific theological questions that 8-year-olds produce without warning or preamble. Last Wednesday, she had asked him, while he was straightening the blanket over her legs, whether the heart was the part of you that actually felt things, or whether the brain did all of that and the heart just kept the body going. He thought about it honestly, the way she expected him to. The brain does the feeling, he said. The heart keeps you running. But the brain can't do its job if the heart stops. So in a way, the heart is where everything starts. Lily considered this with the gravity she gave to most things that mattered. What if the heart has a problem? She asked. He looked at her. Then we fix it, he said. She accepted this with the complete, uncomplicated trust of someone who has never been given a reason not to trust. She went back to her book. He watched her for a moment, the green lines moving on the monitor, her hands folded on the sheet, the photograph on the nightstand, and Elena's tilted head and the lake behind her. He turned the cart and went back to work. Dr. Victoria Hale had been assigned to lead Lily's surgical team 6 weeks before she walked past him in the corridor. Marcus had seen her name added to the case file on the wall outside Lily's room and had stood reading it the way he read certain things, with full attention and no outward sign of it. He knew her work. He had read 4 of her published studies and watched, via a recorded session, a lecture she had delivered 18 months ago at a cardiology symposium in Boston. She was technically precise, and she was thorough, and she ran her surgical floor with the authority of someone who had earned it entirely and had no interest in wearing it lightly. Her dismissal of people she considered outside her operational circle was not meanness. It was architecture. She had built her world to run at a certain altitude, and the people who kept the building clean existed below the line of her awareness the way the building's pipes did. Necessary, invisible, never thought about until something went wrong. The first time she looked at him directly was a Thursday afternoon in the consultation room adjacent to Lily's unit. Marcus had brought in a set of updated imaging printouts from radiology and was setting them on the side table when Dr. Hale and 2 of her residents came through the door mid-conversation. One of the residents was Dr. Amara Cole, 2nd year, who had once asked Marcus about a misplaced file and was one of the few people on the floor who had ever looked at him the same way twice. Dr. Hale moved to the imaging wall, pulled 2 scans out, and held them side by side. She spoke to the residents about the septal location, about the approach angle for the repair. Her voice was level and unhurried, the voice of someone explaining something to people who needed to listen carefully. Marcus had picked up the supply bin and was heading for the door when he stopped. He looked at the scan she was holding. He stood there long enough to be visible, long enough to be noticed. There was a measurement on the second image being read at a value that would affect the surgical approach in a way that would create a problem. It was a correctable problem, but it needed to be identified before the operating room, not inside it. Dr. Hale turned and looked at him. The look lasted 2 seconds. It carried no particular heat, just the look of someone determining whether an object in her workspace had a reason to be there. "You can wait outside," she said. He nodded and moved toward the door. He had almost cleared the frame when he said it. He did not turn all the way back. His voice was level. The measurement on the second scan, the ventricular wall margin, if that number's being used to set the repair angle, it's reading about 2 millimeters short of the actual boundary. The artifact in the lower left quadrant is pulling the edge detection off. The real margin is wider. The room went very quiet. Dr. Hale held the scan up again and looked at the quadrant he had mentioned. She looked at it for a moment. Then she looked back at him, and something had changed in the look. Not warmth, not openness, but the particular attention of a surgeon encountering a reading that does not match the hypothesis. "That is not a concern you need to have," she said. Her voice was even. "If you have questions about the clinical materials you're transporting, direct them to the charge nurse." He nodded once. He went out the door. In the hallway, he stood for a moment, looking at the wall. Then he took the cart and pushed it toward the elevator. He was correct about the measurement, and he knew he was correct, and he also knew it would be caught during the pre-surgical review by Dr. Cole, most likely who had a careful eye and who he had observed more than once catching something a more senior resident had moved past. It would be corrected. Lily would be fine. He pressed the button for the basement level. The elevator doors closed. 2 floors up, the green lines moved on the monitor above his daughter's bed, steady and slow and entirely patient, the way good things tend to be when they are built correctly and left to do what they were made to do. The pre-surgical imaging review happened on a Friday morning at 7, before rounds in the same consultation room. Dr. Hale ran it herself, standing at the wall with a coffee she hadn't drunk yet, moving through the scans in sequence while Dr. Cole and 2 other residents stood behind her with their notepads and the stillness of people who have learned when not to speak. She stopped at the second scan. She held it up. She looked at the lower left quadrant for a long moment. The same quadrant the orderly had pointed to 2 days earlier with the flat, unhurried precision of someone reading something obvious. She pulled a second scan from the drawer, the corrected version that radiology had sent up after she'd submitted a review request Thursday evening, and held them side by side. The margin in the corrected version was 2 millimeters wider. She set both scans back on the wall and picked up her coffee. Dr. Cole said nothing. She had submitted the review request on Dr. Hale's behalf Thursday evening, after the consultation room, after the orderly had gone, after she had quietly pulled the original scan herself and looked at the lower left quadrant for approximately 90 seconds before going to find the attending radiologist. Dr. Hale did not address it directly. She moved on to the third scan and continued the review, and the morning proceeded the way mornings in surgical departments proceed, forward without ceremony, toward the next thing that needed doing. But that evening, leaving the building at 8:30, Dr. Hale stopped at the end of the pediatric wing corridor and looked at the door of room 412, which was half open, and through which she could see the edge of a hospital bed and the faint green glow of a monitor. She stood there for 5 seconds. Then she continued to the elevator. She did not know whose room it was. The name on the doorboard meant nothing to her at that moment. There were 31 patients in her department. She knew all of their cases and very few of their names, because names were not the information that saved people. She had made her peace with this a long time ago. What she could not make peace with at that particular moment was the Reyes protocol. She had known from the beginning that Lily's case required the complex dual defect variant, the one Reyes had developed specifically for cases where the pulmonary and septal defect presented in this exact spatial relationship to each other. She had performed the standard version 4 times in 3 years, and she was good at it. She was among the best active surgeons performing it. But the dual defect variant was something she had only studied on paper. It required a specific intraoperative decision at the fourth stage that Reyes himself had described in the original publication in precise technical language that left no room for improvisation, and that language described the logic of the moment without giving you the feel of it, the way all truly technical writing eventually reaches a wall that only experience can cross. She needed to talk to someone who had been in that operating room with him, someone who had watched him make that decision in real time. She had spent 4 days trying to reach 3 surgeons who had trained under Reyes directly, and none of them had called back, and the surgery was in 9 days. Marcus was transporting Lily to her afternoon scan when they passed Dr. Hale in the third-floor corridor. He was pushing the wheelchair. Lily insisted on sitting in it even though she was cleared to walk, because it was faster and the scan room had a ceiling light she described as looking like the inside of a cloud, and Dr. Hale was moving in the opposite direction with a folder under her arm and her attention somewhere else entirely. She glanced at Lily first, the instinctive attention most adults give children in hospital corridors without registering that they've done it. Then she glanced at Marcus. She had been about to keep moving when something, the two of them together, the way Lily's hand rested on Marcus's wrist where it gripped the wheelchair handle, made her pause for half a second before she continued. She did not stop. She did not say anything, but she looked back once at the far end of the corridor before she turned the corner. Marcus did not see it. He was reading the directional sign above the scan room door. Lily was looking up at the lights. "That's the cloud kind," Lily said, pointing. "It is," Marcus said. She lowered her arm and went quiet in the way she got quiet when something was sitting just below the surface of the sentence. "Dad," she said. He looked down at her. "Do you think the surgery doctor is good?" He pushed the chair another few feet toward the scan room door. He was aware of the question the way a man is aware of a deep step in the dark, with the whole body, not just the mind. "Yes," he said. "How do you know?" He stopped the chair and came around to face her. She was looking at him with the direct, uncomplicated attention she gave to things that mattered. "Because I've read her work," he said, "and because the people around her are careful." He paused. "And because I'm going to be here every single day until you go home." She looked at him for a moment in the assessing way she had, not measuring the words, but reading whatever was underneath them, the thing she had been calibrating against him for 8 years. She found what she was looking for. She faced forward. "Okay," she said. He pushed the door open. The drawing was on the side table when he came to see her after his shift that evening. A piece of construction paper she had gotten from a nurse, covered in a carefully rendered heart with 2 large wings attached to both sides. Underneath it, in her round and deliberate handwriting, "This is my heart going to get fixed." He picked it up. He looked at it for a long time. He folded it carefully and placed it in the breast pocket of his uniform. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. The surgical team meeting was Monday morning at 6:30 in the 7th floor conference room. Marcus was 2 floors down, pushing a linen cart through the maternity wing when it happened. He did not hear what was said inside it. He heard some of it later. Dr. Cole found him in the supply corridor at 11:15, her hands in her coat pockets, with the expression of someone who has been carrying something all morning and decided to set it down. She said, without preamble, "The review request on the Lily Reyes imaging. Did you initiate that, or did I?" He looked at her. "You did," he said. She nodded. She looked at the shelf of linen bags to his left for a moment. Then she said, "The team meeting this morning. They're confirmed on the protocol approach. The dual defect variant." She paused. "Dr. Hale has been trying to reach surgeons who trained under the technique's originator. She needs someone who's done the complex version. She's not finding anyone." Marcus kept his hands on the cart handle. "Is the procedure still on schedule?" he asked. 9 days, Dr. Cole said. She looked at him with the particular expression of someone standing at a door they are not sure they should open. Then she said, very evenly, "Is there anything you think Dr. Hale should know? About the case or about anything else?" He looked at her. There was a pause that was not a refusal and not an answer, but something between the two, the pause of a man weighing something he's been weighing for a long time. "She'll find what she needs," he said. Dr. Cole held his gaze for a moment longer. Then she nodded and went back down the corridor. He watched her turn the corner. He stood there with his hands on the cart handle, looking at the wall, and then he pushed the cart forward and went back to work. It was Thursday evening when it happened, 4 days before the surgery. Marcus was coming off his shift, 7 minutes past 3, slightly later than usual because of a spill on the 4th floor that needed attending. He took the east stairwell rather than the elevator when he wasn't transporting anything, because the stairwell was generally empty, and empty was its own kind of rest. He was on the landing between the 3rd and 2nd floors when he heard someone below him. Quick footsteps, the cadence of someone moving with purpose, and then stopping abruptly. He came around a lower landing, and Dr. Victoria Hale was standing on the 2nd floor step with her phone held out in front of her and an expression he had never seen on her face before. It was the expression of someone who has just lost the one tool they were counting on at the exact moment they needed it most. The screen was dark. The phone was dead. She had been 2 minutes into a call she had waited 3 days to get through on. A former colleague at Mayo, Dr. Richard Funn, who had spent a year on surgical exchange with Marcus in 2014 and was the last name on her list she had not yet reached. He had called back 20 minutes ago. She had been talking to him for 90 seconds when the battery died. She looked up and saw Marcus on the landing. They stood there for a moment in the particular quality of silence that stairwells hold in the middle of a workday. Marcus looked at his own phone. He had checked it an hour earlier, for percent. He had been going to charge it in the locker room after his shift. He checked the number on the screen now. For percent still. Enough for a call of a few minutes if the signal was reasonable. He came down the last flight of steps and held it out. She looked at it. Then she looked at him. The maintenance gray, the worn boots, the name badge, with the fractional suspension of a person who is not expected to need something from someone they had not previously noticed. She took the phone. She dialed from memory, fast and sure. It rang twice. A voice answered, and she exhaled very slightly and said, "Richard, battery died. Still with you." She turned a quarter away and continued the conversation her dead phone had interrupted. Marcus stayed on the landing. He leaned against the wall and looked at the stairwell door and waited. He could hear her side of the conversation clearly enough. She was describing the case in the compressed, exact language that surgeons use with each other: anatomy, approach angle, the decision point in the 4th stage of the repair. She said, the dual defect variant, the version published in 2011. I need to understand how he read that 4th stage moment in the room. The paper describes the outcome, but not the decision logic. A pause while Dr. Funn spoke. Then she said, "No, I know. I've been trying to reach anyone who trained with him directly. Nobody's available or nobody's returning calls." She paused again. 3 days, Richard. The surgery is in 4 days now. Another pause. Longer this time. Then she said, "What do you mean he's here?" Her voice had not changed in volume. It had changed in something else, something underneath. The way the floor of a room will shift slightly when the thing supporting it moves. The change almost imperceptible until you realize you've noticed it. She listened. Her free hand went still at her side. She said, "Since when?" She listened again. Then she said, "Okay." The word came out flat and full at the same time. Not an agreement, but a reckoning. The single syllable a person uses when a thing they thought was far away has just arrived in the room they are standing in. She lowered the phone. She stood with her back half-turned, looking at the stairwell door. And then she turned and looked at Marcus Reyes fully. Not the way she had looked at him in the consultation room. Not the way she had glanced at him in the corridor, but with the whole, revised attention of someone who is discovering in real time that the version of the room they have been standing in was not the actual room at all. He held out his hand for the phone. She placed it in his palm. The screen read 2%. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was steady. She was a surgeon who had held herself together in rooms where people died, and she knew how to hold a thing. He nodded. He put the phone in his pocket and went past her down the last flight of stairs toward the ground floor exit. His footsteps were even on the concrete steps. He did not look back. She stood on the landing and watched him go, and she stood there for a while after the door at the bottom had closed, in the stairwell quiet, with the sound of the building's ventilation system running steadily through its structure and the faint distant sound of the hospital going about its business 4 days before an 8-year-old girl named Lily Reyes was scheduled to go into surgery. And the name she had just said out loud to a colleague 3 states away was the name on the door of room 412. She found him the next morning at 6:40 in the east stairwell. She had checked the supply wing first, and then the locker room corridor, and then, on some instinct she could not have explained to anyone, she pushed open the stairwell door, and he was there on the second-floor landing with a cup of coffee and the folded construction paper in his hands, looking at the drawing the way a man looks at something he has decided he will carry forever. He heard the door. He looked up. Dr. Hale stood at the bottom of the stairs in her surgical clothes, not her white coat, which meant she had come before the day officially started, before any professional frame was available to put around what she needed to say. He recognized it as a deliberate choice and waited. She came up 3 steps and stopped. "I spoke with Richard from last night," she said, "after I charged my phone." He nodded once. She looked at the construction paper in his hands, then looked away from it. She had the expression of someone who has been composing a sentence for hours and has arrived at the moment to say it and discovered the sentence is not adequate. "The patient in room 412, she said. "Lily Reyes." "Yes." "She is your daughter." "Yes." She stood with that for a moment. The ventilation system ran its low, steady note through the building around them. "You handed me your phone," she said, "knowing your battery was nearly gone, knowing you'd need it." She paused. "You didn't say anything." "No," he said. She looked at him the way people look at something they have been standing beside for weeks without seeing it. "The imaging measurement," she said. "The consultation room. I sent you out." "I saw what I saw," he said, without edge, without the need for her to apologize for it. It had been corrected, and that was the full extent of what mattered to him. She sat down on the step. Not dramatically, but the way people sit when a version of the world they have been standing inside has quietly dissolved and the pieces are settling around their feet. She sat and was quiet for a moment, and the quiet was the honest kind. "I've been trying to reach the surgeon who designed the protocol for 4 days, she said. "You've been 40 feet from my office." He held the drawing. He looked at it. "My daughter needs the surgery," he said. "That part hasn't changed." "I know." She looked at him with nothing else in the way. No category, no assessment, just one surgeon looking at another. "That's why I need you in that room. Not because I can't do it. I can do it. But there is one moment in that operation where I need you standing next to me, and I need you to tell me when." He was quiet for a long moment. He looked at the heart with its 2 wings, the round, careful handwriting underneath. He folded it and placed it back in his breast pocket. "Tell me your schedule," he said. He did not tell Lily he would be inside the operating room. He sat with her the night before and told her the surgical team was good and that the doctor who had spent weeks studying her case knew exactly what needed to be done. He told her that when she woke up, the green lines on the monitor would still be moving, and he would be in the chair by the window, and the photograph of her mother would be on a nightstand exactly where it always was. "Will it hurt?" she asked. "Not while it's happening," he said. "A little after. But I'll be there." "The whole time?" "The whole time." She looked at him in the assessing way she always did, not measuring the words, but reading what was underneath them, the thing she had been calibrating in him her entire life. She found what she was looking for. She faced forward and closed her eyes. He stayed in the chair beside her until her breathing settled into the slow rhythm of sleep. Then he went to the kitchen table and sat in the dark with a cup of coffee and the drawing flat in front of him and stayed there for a long time, not thinking about the surgery or the protocol or the operating room, just looking at the heart with its wings and the handwriting of a person who trusted him completely and had never once been given a reason not to. He went to bed at midnight. He slept. The operating room was cold and bright, the way they always are. Marcus had stood in rooms like this one more than 400 times, and the cold and the light were the same, as they had always been. And when he pulled on the second glove and flexed his hands, the muscle memory that had been sitting dormant for 4 years rose to the surface the way it does when something that was built carefully is called back to the work it was built for. His hands were steady. They had always been steady. He took his position to Dr. Hale's left. Dr. Cole stood across the table. Dr. Hale worked the first 3 stages with a precision that confirmed everything he had read of her published work, and then exceeded it by a margin that publications cannot fully capture. She was good. Not technically good in the way that training alone produces, but good in the way that years of accumulated judgment produce. The kind that makes the room quieter because everyone in it understands they are watching something done at the level it was designed to be done. She did not rush. She did not perform. She simply worked, and the work was excellent. He did not speak during the first 3 stages. She did not ask him to. The 4th stage arrived. The moment was never dramatic. It was a 3-second window in which the anatomy presented a configuration that looked, to any surgeon who had not seen it before, like one thing, and was in fact another. The specific reading error that Reyes had identified and corrected in his 2011 publication, and that the correction of which was the entire reason the protocol worked as well as it did. He had seen it 41 times. He saw it now. He said one word. Wait. Dr. Hale stopped. He looked at the field for 2 seconds. 2 millimeters left, he said. The septal margin is presenting wide. If you angle from the current position, you'll close against the wrong boundary. The room was very still. The monitor ran its lines. Dr. Hale looked at the field. She held her position. The full, honest moment of a surgeon taking in new information in real time and deciding whether to trust it. She looked the way she had looked at the corrected imaging scan, holding both versions side by side, with the particular attention of someone revising what they thought they knew. She adjusted 2 millimeters to the left. She completed the stage. She completed the repair. The monitor ran its lines, and then ran different lines, cleaner and more regular, the profile of a corrected defect, a heart doing what it was built to do. No one spoke for a full 5 seconds. Then Dr. Hale said, evenly, to the room, "Good." It was the word she used when something had been done correctly. Marcus had read this in her case notes. He stepped back from the table and let the room continue around him. Lily came out of the anesthesia, slowly, at her own pace, the way she did most things. Marcus was in the chair by the window. The photograph was on the nightstand. The green lines moved in their new, clean pattern, steadier than he had seen them in 4 months. She opened her eyes and looked at the ceiling for a moment, then found him. "The whole time?" she said. Her voice was small and slightly blurred at the edges. "The whole time," he said. She was quiet. Then, "I had a dream that my heart was flying." He looked at her. Where did it go? She considered this with the gravity she reserved for things that deserved it. "Nowhere," she said. "It just flew around for a while and then came back." She paused. It liked being back. He reached over and straightened the blanket over her legs. She closed her eyes again, and he sat with his hands in his lap and the green lines moving above her, and said nothing because there was nothing that needed to be said. Dr. Hale came by room 412 that evening. She stood in the doorway. Marcus was in the chair and Lily was asleep, her hands folded on the sheet, the drawing on a nightstand beside Elena's photograph. Dr. Hale looked at the photograph for a moment. Then she looked at Marcus. "I owe you more than an apology," she said. She said it plainly, without performance, because she was not a person who performed contrition, and this moment did not deserve anything less than the real thing. "I treated you as though you were invisible. I was wrong, and I knew at the moment you corrected the imaging and I sent you out of the room anyway." He did not say it was fine. It hadn't been fine, and they both knew it, and honesty deserved honesty in return. "You caught it in the oar," he said, "when it mattered." "Yes," she said, "because you were there." The monitor ran its clean new lines between them. She looked at Lily sleeping, and something moved across her face that had not been there in any of the weeks he had observed her in corridors and consultation rooms and surgical floors. Something that was not competence or authority or the controlled precision of a woman who had built her world to run at a specific altitude. Something that was simply human. The look of a person who has seen what love looks like when it is quiet and total and asks nothing back from the world at all. She left 10 minutes later. At the door, she stopped without turning around. "The 4th stage," she said. 2 millimeters left. I'll never read that moment the same way again." He nodded. She went out, and her footsteps faded down the corridor, and the wings settled back into its nighttime quiet. The ventilation, the distant elevator, the steady green lines above his daughter's bed. 3 weeks later, she found him in the east stairwell again. They nearly collided coming through the door from opposite sides, and both stepped back, and there was the specific silence that exists between two people who have been through something together and are still finding the shape of what comes after. She had a folder under her arm. She had been working since 6. There's a case, she said. A 9-year-old boy at Northwestern. Septal configuration almost identical to Lily's. His family has been told the procedure carries too much risk given his additional complications. His cardiologist called me yesterday. She paused. I told him I knew someone who might be willing to consult. She said it without pressure, without the authority she had carried every other time she had spoken to him. She said the way you say something when you genuinely do not know the answer and are not trying to manufacture one. He looked at the stairwell door. He thought about a family sitting somewhere in a waiting room being told a thing they did not want to hear, and about a boy he had never met, and about his daughter down the hall with the photograph on the nightstand and the drawing beside it. It just flew around for a while and then came back. It liked being back. One consult, he said. She nodded. He went out the door and down the corridor toward the pediatric wing, toward room 412, where Lily was sitting up with her book and the green lines running clean and steady on the monitor above her, and the morning light pressing in at a low angle through the window, ordinary and unhurried, entirely indifferent to what had been done in this building and entirely unchanged by the fact that it had been done right. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.